wanted to choose a comfortable life for yourself, which is very, once again, contrarian to the thought that has been injected in a lot of Indians, that you have to work hard, you have to grind to be able to make it big in life. I was actually sent to a coaching class for my plus one and plus two. Those were almost the most dark ages of my life, at least.
At many points, certainly did a bunch of things I don't think an ordinary middle school teenager in India would do. And I think that's what all of it added up.
I wanted to now quickly shift levers and talk about your CAT examination preparation. From what I know, once again from a distance, that you prepared for it, you excelled at it, yet you didn't do it. So could you once again talk first about your preparation strategy, and then what kind of decisions or what kind of ecosystems that you were surrounded with at that point of time that led you to actually not pick one of the top B schools in India? Hi, are you someone who's preparing for CAT examination and wants to actually do an MBA? Then hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Shatakshi. Whenever I'm on a break, I make really absolutely cool free educational content around MBA, around careers and around skills. So feel free to hit on the subscribe and the notification button so that you get notified whenever I am actually on vacations like these and shooting really interesting podcasts with friends and colleagues on this Shatakshi show. In today's show, I have Subhashish, who is someone from my own school, St. Stephen's College, and he is going to be walking through his journey right from high school to, of course, how he decided to prepare for CAT, get the best percentile, and yet not choose to study at the top IIMs in this country. I really hope that you find his journey interesting, educational, and inspiring as well. And with that, let's get started. Alright, so welcome Subhashish on the Shatakshi show. I am personally very excited to have you on this show. You might not know, but the young Shatakshi in St. Stephen's College admired you immensely from a distance, of course, in college. So it's really meaningful for me to have you on this show. Over to you. Would love to have initial remarks from you as we start.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you saying that, and obviously been following your work, and that's been super inspirational about going off the beaten path. So hopefully we'll delve into some of those topics today. So glad to be here and really excited to speak to you.
Same here. So Subhashish, when I look your journey from a distance, at least I get a lot of hints that you have picked a lot of contrarian paths. And for example, I was recently talking to the founder of Mu Sigma. He's someone who actually joined a management consulting like both of us. And then in the initial year of his management consulting in US, he actually wanted to start a new venture. And he interestingly wanted to start Mu Sigma within that management consulting. As luck would have it, he told me that the firm rejected that idea. And today he really admires that the firm rejected that idea. Now he is, of course, he's a founder of Mu Sigma. Which means that contrarian bets could have a lot of upside, but of course could have a lot of downside as well. I see that in you, and of course there are a lot of writers and thought leaders such as Peter Thiel who talk about contrarian bets. So this entire podcast is going to be about your contrarian bets. We will cover them right from the starting to now. So I would want to start right off the bat with your high school journey. I suppose you were a rank holder with your CBSE or ICSE boards. How did you feel when you actually achieved that rank? What was the next step for you? So over to you.
Got it. So look, I mean, as most of us who've written these exams know, that the high school exams, unfortunately, or fortunately for me in this case, tend to be much a result of luck, right? I mean, that obviously among like 600,000 or 800,000 people, there are lots of people who work really hard, who probably are in that kind of the top, let's say 5 percentile or something. But between that, there's probably not as much to differentiate it, right? So whatever you score within that is obviously a point of luck, and therefore when I kind of luck chose me to be one of those people who scored the highest in the country, I think it was certainly, I felt a lot of gratitude. I felt very lucky, I felt very loved because of how people around me behaved. Beyond that, obviously going to St. Stephen's College as I did and you did later as well is obviously it's a fairly obvious decision given that it's one of the better colleges of the country. So I wouldn't necessarily call that in that sense a contrarian decision. I think what was again not very contrarian, but certainly took some thinking was the decision to not pursue engineering. Or 2 years before that, my cousin who'd stayed with me had actually prepared for engineering for about 2 years, and he got into IIT in computer science and all of that. So clearly I was exposed to that. My father's from IIT as well, so I was exposed to that. I knew what it takes, etc. And I think at that point I just made a decision saying, this is not my life. I'm not going to choose the harder path for 2 or 3 years to get there. I would rather do something that I feel comfortable doing. So I think that in that sense might have been a somewhat more contrarian decision than the one that came eventually.
Correct. I really like that you are saying that very early in your life you wanted to choose a comfortable life for yourself, which is very, once again, contrarian to the thought that has been injected in a lot of Indians, that you have to work hard, you have to grind to be able to make it big in life. Could you also talk me through if there were dinner table debates at your house that why not IIT, given that your father himself was enrolled in IIT?
Got it. So again, a few years before that, the contrarian thing was that at some point I just kind of told, and my parents also kind of brought me up in a way where they said, you make your own decision, stick by the implications of those decisions. And this was even before the decision to not pursue engineering. And I think that and I obviously had some to contribute to that. I mean, even in like middle school, I would walk up to my parents and say, look, boss, I mean, I'm going to do my thing, so don't uh, I think we found a good equilibrium of them not interfering, because at the end of the day, our parents would not necessarily understand all the options we have, right? In the generation that our parents would have grown up in, Shatakshi, I'm sure they had far more limited options. They would not even understand management consulting. I don't think any of our relatives would understand why do people pay you this young person to give them advice, right? So clearly they don't understand it. And I think I have to be very grateful to my parents to acknowledge that they didn't understand it and therefore not intervene in those decisions. Now, coming back to the point about not choosing the harder path, which I think, as you're very rightly saying, that we glorify or choosing the harder path and the hustle culture and all of that. The way I think of it is not like when we choose the alternative path, we don't work hard, right? I'm sure when we go off the beaten path, we are still working very hard. The way I like to think of it is, if you're devoting, let's say, 10 to 12 hours a day to studying or whatever else you do, the output you get from that is your input hours divided by your productivity, right? So you divide that 10 by a certain number. And if the harder path for you, the denominator is larger, so your overall returns from that 10 hours is lower. Whereas if you choose a path that you are good at, then the denominator becomes smaller such that the overall returns become higher, right? So I don't think of it as working hard or working less. Sure, you may work a little bit less on the margins, but you're still working hard at what we do. What's more important is our productivity in doing that. And someone might be really good at math, someone might be really good at physics and chemistry, and for them, IIT will be a cakewalk or JEE will be cakewalk. I was not that person, right? I struggled with chemistry, I struggled with physics, I still do. So for me, that was not a cakewalk. For me, the other alternative path is where I could actually be more productive. And that's where I kind of choose that. So I don't think off the beaten path are people who are like, oh, I'm so lazy, I'm not going to do JEE. It's more like I'm not going to be productive enough in doing JEE than at something else.
That's a very honest answer. And in fact, because you were talking about your own book, I'm also writing about my book, which is about the 90s kid. I was born in 91, the liberalization of India happened. And in the hindsight, I realized that I was actually sent to a coaching class for my +1 and +2. Those were almost the most dark ages of my life, at least. I knew that I'm not going to crack it. I knew that I'm not going to be good at it. Yet, at least in my case, I don't think I was good negotiator with my parents. With that, Subhashish, could you walk us through what your family structure is like? Are you the oldest or the youngest, the only child? What did your parents do? What was growing up in India? And if I'm not wrong, you're from West Bengal. What was it like for you?
Got it. So my father was in the Indian Navy, and my mother is a homemaker. And I am the younger sibling. So I have an elder sibling elder brother who's about 4 years older than me. While we are Bengalis, because of nature of my dad's job, obviously we were posted in the naval cities, which would be Visakhapatnam and Delhi as the headquarters. So much like many of at least people in my social circle and understand what a bubble that is in the wider context of India. But growing up as a 1990s kid with a father in the Indian kind of government services, etc., is an experience that I guess many of us who are privileged enough to be in that bubble share. And growing up was certainly, my family's always, as you can imagine, my cousin who stayed with us and then went to IIT, there was a lot of focus on academics. So we were the kind of household that incentivized both through carrots and sticks, people performing very well in their academics. The benefit I had as the younger sibling was that my brother bore the brunt of it. So my brother was the one who probably, in retrospect, and especially in today's time, not appropriate, but my brother's the one who kind of got beaten up and all of that to make him perform better. I think my parents by that time were a lot softer on me, but it was certainly the kind of household where I felt, being out of the top few of your class was not necessarily an option. So that was the environment that we grew up in, but it was, at least in my case, it was never in that sense an explicit pressure. It was always implicit. So kind of behaved myself and kept myself in that particular lane.
Got it. I relate a lot to that story because I'm the youngest myself. My brother did engineering. He was actually the one to tell my father that she is not going to do engineering, she will rather go to St. Stephen's College. So I also got a lot of benefit by being the younger sibling. And in fact, the entire Shatakshi show is about people who do not get that early guidance or who do not have that cushion. They should be able to at least learn something from the Shatakshi show. Subhish, yes.
So I would also add that I think many people don't realize, it's a negotiation, right? A lot of people, especially if I talk about my story, would look at it and say, hey, you had more liberal parents who were more accommodative, etc. And all of that is true, right? I will definitely not take away from that. But I think it's an entire negotiation, which, as you rightly said, also includes your sibling. How does your sibling show up for you? How do they hold your back, etc.? Even though I, in that sense, have a very deep relationship with my sibling, where I kind of, whatever I have to pass on as information or whenever I need support, I kind of give it to my sibling. But it's also negotiation of yourself, right? At many points, certainly did a bunch of things I don't think an ordinary middle school teenager in India would do. And I think that's what all of it added up to come to this point. And while my book, which I talk about, Caged Tiger, is obviously the kind of bigger picture of government and institutions in India. But for me, honestly, the micro beginning of that was that I think in many ways, all Indians, every Indian by their family is caged, by their society is caged, by the weight of expectations is caged in many ways. So while my book is not about all of that, but I think I did draw that parallel between the lives that we live as Indians, where we're caged by layer upon layer of expectations with the country itself as a whole. So sorry to interrupt you, but I definitely wanted to add that perspective that this is a shared negotiation. And I think people often underestimate how much agency they themselves have to change their equation with their parents.
This is such a beautiful articulation because you suddenly combined economics with the macro governance to your micro story. And I wanted to now quickly shift levers and talk about your CAT examination preparation. The reason is a lot of people in this country who do not get their undergrad right. Then they feel that my next ticket to actually getting my career sorted or my salary sorted is through the Indian MBA route. From what I know, once again from a distance, that you prepared for it, you excelled at it, yet you didn't do it. So could you once again talk first about your preparation strategy, and then what kind of decisions or what kind of ecosystems that you were surrounded with at that point of time that led you to actually not pick one of the top B schools in India?
Understood. Happy to speak about it. Firstly, I want to say, as far as preparation is concerned, and I want people who are listening to the show to understand that very often they say people who think they do well have something extraordinary going for them or something like that. And I want to come clean over two things, right? One is, I don't think I'm ever the kind of person who can really do that extreme academic hustle right at the end. I've never been that person. I cannot stay up late at nights. I cannot wake up early in the morning. And I knew that limitation of mine. Second, of course, I'm decent at math. Otherwise, wouldn't have been able to do all of that. But I'm A, petrified, and B, not extremely good. Like among my peer groups, I would probably rate myself above average rather than even like at the height of all of that. Now, with these two factors in mind, the only thing that's ever worked for me is to start early and be consistent. So in that sense, the CAT preparation started about a year and a half before the actual CAT, and it was literally no exceptional hard work, just going to those coaching classes, etc., staying there and working beyond that, maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, not more than that, and that stayed at a constant drumbeat. And again, I want to pick out some specific instances to just talk about how I, approached it somewhat differently. Like the CAT coaching that I chose was very simple. The one that was closest to college, so I don't have to spend time commuting. And secondly, was the only one where I was getting good 5 to 7 p.m. slots, so kind of nap in the afternoon. Because I knew that's going to keep me productive. My CAT coaching was more like camaraderie with my teachers who used to go out for like in North Campus eating chole bhature and all of that, right? So it wasn't so much, it wasn't very cutthroat. It was very camaraderie driven, etc. And the third thing is, a couple of weeks before the CAT coaching, and you might have been in college at that time, our college finally got got Wi-Fi. And then all of us like really went bonkers, and we were like, oh, now we can play all these multiplayer games together. So last couple of weeks, right before my CAT, I had actually stopped preparing for CAT, and I was actually playing these computer games till late at night. All of that to say is that start early, do a little bit every day so that you have the luxury to be able to do all those things. And that journey then doesn't kill you. It becomes just part of who you are, right? And it becomes a couple of hours a day, a week, or whatever else that takes. So that was what CAT prep looked like. So coaching class, starting early, etc. What also helped me on the way was that I took the GMAT, and I think the GMAT builds the rigor, especially on the verbal part, that is really helpful and translates very well to the CAT. Now the decision to not take it, when I kind of interviewed, I did interview as well, and then I got some of those offers. At that point, again, I kind of just closed my eyes and said, I've just had 3 years where I kind of studied to get the good grades. I did the extracurricular activities to make my profile stronger. I sat through interviews and got a job with a management consulting firm. And when I closed my eyes and thought of IIMs, I thought I would do the exact same thing for 2 more years. And then the question became, A, do I need this? And B, do I have the appetite for this? Because I already had the McKinsey job, it didn't seem that I really needed it. Someone who was almost in my position exactly a year before that made the opposite choice. She decided to go to an IIM and give up on McKinsey. But for me, it didn't make sense. So I think people at the same junction can make different choices. And the second thing was that I, again, just did not see myself doing that for 2 more years. So it was a very instinctive choice. It was a very lifestyle driven choice. And I said, look, this is not for me. So I'm going to work and do something, learn something new.
Correct. I really resonate with your answer about the first one. At the face of it, when someone might look at your journey or someone like your journey, it might seem that this person was a prodigy. But what you're saying is, in the hindsight, there was 1.5 years of preparation that was going on, and eventually it became second nature. So that is one key takeaway that could be for our audience. And around the second thing, I do remember, I think her name was Shreya, if I'm not wrong. Yes, I had a very brief chat with her in college, and about the Wi-Fi, no doubt. I was in Rudra South, spent my final year just watching a lot of movies, so can completely relate. And I really like the answer that you looked within rather than you looked outside and found which answer will work out for you or not. With that, I would like to understand your 1 year at, or approximately the same journey at McKinsey, 1 year or 2 year. I typically say that the smartest at McKinsey, BCG, Bain, etc. are the quickest to leave. So could you just briefly talk about how your stint at McKinsey was like? How did you feel? What were your learnings? If there were any dislikes, and then we'll move forward. Why did you exit McKinsey so early?
McKinsey was definitely very different. It was a very steep learning curve. And I think that's a journey most of us go through in our first jobs. Because suddenly you're in this job, you know you're supposed to do this and work for the next 30, 40 years. And you're away from everything that was very comfortable to you, we've grown up our entire life in the academic system, and suddenly we are out of the academic system, right? It's a complete change in what you need to do to succeed in life. It's a complete change in your own, how long you need to work, what kind of things you need to work on, etc. And I think that hit me very, very hard. My time at McKinsey, not for any fault of McKinsey, was really difficult for me to reconcile all of these different strands. My first project that I undertook at McKinsey was there was a plant in rural Gujarat. So again, just flying in and out every week to Baroda city, being there away from everything you knew in Delhi, etc., was definitely challenging. However, um, I think one of the things that certainly now when I speak to people about their jobs, I say unless it's kind of explicitly bad, think about just staying there and like that resilience and just keeping going. And that's what I kind of just used at McKinsey as well. I just kept going. I didn't think too much about how I'm feeling. I said, look, this is not an explicitly bad situation. It's not a bad work culture. Nobody's being abusive or exploitative of me in any way. I'm learning a lot. I know it's difficult. It's long hours. It's the slog, etc. But let me keep at it just so I understand this and build this. So my first year, I got a kind of medium rating or whatever else. But the second year, when I was able to finally come to terms with a whole bunch of things that I was feeling, I started performing better. I saw a rating uptake and all of that. So for me, again, this goes somewhat contradictory to what we spoke about earlier about not choosing the hard path. But here, what I'm talking about is once you choose, you ideally should kind of have the resilience to stick it out or stick by the implications of your decisions as long as you can. And that was in a nutshell McKinsey. For me, the most important thing was obviously made a lot of friends. There's a lot of things you build out of that shared sense of working together. And McKinsey and any consulting firm working in smaller teams, you become really, really close to the people you're working with. And for me, I've really been very close to the folks I met at that time. And I think my closest professional friendships probably come from that phase of my life.
I've heard interesting stories about McKinsey BA cohorts, so I can imagine what kind of camaraderie that you might have had. With that, let's talk about the exits. All right. I really hope that this podcast and Shatakshi show with Subhashish was insightful for all of you. Like I've always said, if you want to learn directly in a live and interactive setting from people like Subhashish and other CEOs, get employment support, and of course join a very talented cohort, feel free to check out my education venture, globalgovernanceInitiative.org, where we run an alternative to international MBA and international MPP. Cheers, I'll see you very much soon.